It's a pleasure to introduce today's expert, Dr. Ari Tuckman. He's the author of 3 books, Understand Your Brain, Get More Done, More Attention, Less Deficit, and Integrative Treatment for Adult ADHD. He is in private practice in Westchester, Pennsylvania, a board member of CHAD, and co-chair of the CHAD Conference Committee. Again, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Tuckman.
Hi there. It is great to be here, and this is a topic that I get a lot in my office. Often it's, the parents of high school seniors. Hopefully it's not in the summer before they're about to go away that this comes up, but preferably it's the parents of high school juniors or even sophomores. So that gives us some time to sort of work on this. But let's take some questions here.
Okay, great. Coming from a parent who feels like they initiate and prompt their teenager a lot, and if they don't, they feel like things don't get done. So do you have some specific strategies on how those teenagers can start to initiate and make their own decisions?
Yeah, so I've got a few thoughts on that. My first thought is the things that you're initiating and prompting your teen to do are probably, a lot of them are things that are important for you that they do, but may not be as important for them that they do. I'm not saying that's a reason why you shouldn't prompt them, but to just sort of be clear about like who's motivated to do what here. Alternatively, some of it may be stuff that like, yeah, I guess I could see why I should do that, but I don't need to do it right now. And that kind of procrastination of ADHD that a lot of people with ADHD of all ages, they don't feel that activation until they get closer. So, a week out, it doesn't exist to them, but like the night before, all of a sudden now they feel it. Some of it might be that, but I think, my advice would be first to kind of think about like, is this something that they are motivated to do, or is it more important to me that they do it? But then to have some conversations with them about like, okay, so here's the stuff that I feel needs to be done. Here's why I think it should be done. I don't really like bugging you about it, but it seems like if I don't, you don't really do it. So what do we do here? Like, how do we get me out of the business of having to bug you all the time with this? And to find out, what are some ways for them to be motivated about it? And, if these are things that are kind of like somewhat non-negotiable in the sense of like, I can't let you fail. Like, that's just not acceptable to me. Then you may just have to accept that you're going to have to do some bugging of them, but to have some conversations about it, kind of going back to what I was talking about before, of like, how do I know that you're ready for college? And to say, like, do not frame this as a threat, but to say, like, you know what, we are watching to see how you handle different things, to know that you are ready to go away to college, because for you to go away and it doesn't work out is not good for anybody. These are the kinds of things that we're watching to make an assessment about your readiness. And if you need to take some time off before you go away to college so it's a good experience, then that's what we're going to do. And that's okay. I mean, there's no shame in that. But if going away to college right after graduation is important to you, then these are some things that we need to work on. And that, again, it's part of many conversations that you're going to have over those years.
Along that same line, I know that grades sometimes are used as a way to motivate teenagers and college students. So what if your student doesn't see your grades as a motivation? How do you help make that connection, that has an effect on their future beyond school and college?
For most of us as adults, we can see that abstract connection between these grades and getting into those colleges and then what follows. So, but these students who aren't as motivated by grades may not see that connection, or this abstract, A is a better than a B, than a C, than a D, just doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't motivate them. So I think if that's the case, you need to step back a bit and talk with them about like, so let's talk about like, what colleges are you thinking about? And, have them name some names, and then you just go online and you say, all right, let's take a look. Let's see what the average GPA, the average SAT, the average, class rank is for the kids who are getting into that school, and help them see how these grades now, even in freshman and sophomore year, directly connect into And to do some quick math, if they're like, oh, well, I can get my grades up later, I say, all right, well, let's see what your GPA is now. And let's do some quick math to figure out, you're going to need to get 117% your last 4 semesters in order, or your last 4 quarters in order to get your GPA up to a 3.0. That seems unlikely. And, so I think that that's part of it. But, it may also be that they just don't have as many options for college, but that they may be one of those people who does well in life, even if they don't do well in school. And as the parent, to not make yourself insane over the grades that they're getting.
We are going to change topics a little bit. We have some questions coming in about parents of current college students. So one who has a daughter who's had an unsuccessful freshman year and is saying that she wants to go back to school, but she hasn't really done anything to show them that she's ready. So as a parent, would you take that as a sign that their child isn't ready to go back, or how would you handle that situation?
Yeah, I think this is a great question and one that I see fairly often. So I think in that case, what I'd recommend is that the parents just talk very directly to their daughter and just say, you say that you want to go back, and I believe you because I don't have reason not to, but at the same time, I'm not seeing you do those things that would get you ready to go back. So here are the things, blah, 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 that your dad and I or your mom and I think are would be important to do before you go. I don't see you doing them. So what are you doing? Like, maybe I'm missing it. So fill me in. Like, what am I missing here that you're not doing or that you are doing that's going to show that you're ready to go back? So start by giving them some benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, to have some to then continue the conversation about it and to say, well, but these are our concerns and these are the things that we're not seeing and that we feel like really we should see to feel like you're ready, and to put something of a timeline on it and to be very, very clear about what that date is, that drop dead date where you need to notify the school, yes, I'm coming back, or no, I'm not, and by the way, here's $1,000 deposit or whatever. So and that should be on the college student to find that out. If they can't manage to find that out, that is not a good sign for their ability to handle anything at school. So it may just be that you need to have some very direct conversations with her about it, and perhaps be prepared that, what, she's not ready, not this semester. That's okay. There'll be another one, but she's not ready this semester. And that burden of proof is on her to show you guys, not on you to sort of chase her to make sure that she is ready.
What about for students who might be in college and might be at home going to a community college or local college who are looking into going away to finish out the rest of their degree? Any different suggestions for that audience?
I mean, first of all, I'm a great proponent of community colleges. I think that, first of all, there's no cheaper college credits around, which is important these days. But they fill a great need in the market, so to speak, in terms of, for a lot of these students that we're talking about, to be able to fill in some classes or to work on some classes while living at home before they go away to college. Most community colleges, I think, don't offer a 4-degree option. At least that's true where I live. That may be different somewhere else, but you can at least get half of your credits there and then you go somewhere else. I think in that case, I would talk to the college student about, here's what we need to see. And again, it's the ultimate grades, but it's also about the process. So how are they handling getting those grades, and how are they handling getting themselves to class and getting into bed on time and getting enough sleep and getting to work and all that other stuff. And again, if it's that mad dash scramble that things are getting done, that does not bode well for how they're going to be when they live on their own or with a roommate who really doesn't give a crap whether they get to class or not, because it's not their job to care whether their roommate gets to class or not. So again, it's that same process of looking at how does this current behavior predict what's going to happen in the future?
We have a parent whose son has difficulty talking about his future and what he wants in life and his goals. And they're wondering, is this typical for someone who has ADHD?
I mean, it can be, depending on how old he is, especially like the younger he is, the more common that is. So if he's like 14 and has trouble thinking about his goals after high school, that would hardly be unusual. If he's like 17, 18 and a senior and he's still having trouble, then, that might not be as common. But yeah, I mean, part of ADHD is not kind of seeing or feeling the future as much as people of the same age who don't have ADHD. So, they're more focused on what's happening right now, more so than, what's coming down the pike. Now, this is part of why kids live with their parents until they're like 18 or 20 or whatever and old enough to go out into the world. Because as parents and adults, we can see the future more effectively. But, if he's really not thinking about the future, then my advice is you don't push him into the future. You don't push him into making decisions about the future too early. And instead, you find other things that he can do. So, getting a job or taking some classes, whatever, doesn't matter what they are, just trying some things out to help him figure out what it is that he might be interested in doing later, and that he might just be one of those guys who kind of blossoms a little bit later. So instead of at 18, it's more like 19, 20, 21 that he sort of figures it out and then, makes it some of those big life choices.
Moving back onto high school students getting ready for college, we have a lot of questions about the gap year and taking that time off. So when would you begin having that conversation about taking a gap year before committing to going to college, or even committing to join the military or do something else after high school?
My recommendation on that is that you just sort of drop it in casually along the way. Not everybody goes straight to college right after high school. There's other things you can do also. And, that your kid's response initially might be, I'm going to college, or I don't want to miss out, or whatever, right? But whatever, you've kind of planted the seed. And then you sort of drop it in again, and then you drop it in again. And, if it really seems like, okay, this is not working out here in high school, or it's not working out well enough for me to feel confident to write a fat check to some college somewhere, that's then when you start talking about the gap year and, what all the options are. Do a little bit of research and say like, oh, I found this one. You go snorkeling in the Bahamas every day and you study like, marine ecosystems or something. So it's something kind of appealing and interesting. And to talk about it as basically as a little bit of a detour to get them prepared for college so that they can really make it a good experience. That you want them to have a good experience in college, which means getting good enough grades to keep themselves in college. And that's where the gap year fits in. Now, you might need to talk to them a little bit about, well, what are we going to tell everyone? All my friends are going away to college. What are we going to tell them that I'm doing? And to make it clear, this is not a punishment. This doesn't mean that they're not smart enough for college. It doesn't mean whatever. It just means that, we're going to do something a little different here, and this is going to be pretty cool. So, you got to kind of sell it right, because especially for a teenager who might feel self-conscious about it, that could be the deal breaker right there. So you need to find a way for them to kind of finesse the language so that the social impact doesn't become the reason why they don't even think about looking at it.
And what about for parents who have sort of done all of this prep work and their child is they're feeling ready to go to college, and they're on campus and they know that they have different support programs or services there? Do you have any suggestions for how they can make the best use of the services that might be available on campus?
I mean, first of all, having some really honest conversations about what services are available and your students' willingness to use them. Because, the sort of like, I don't know, there's this just sort of thing about these college services that, by the time a bunch of these students use it, it's like too late. They show up in the 13th week of the semester and it's like their fate has already been sealed at that point. To have some really kind of honest discussions with them about like, here, if we're going to send you off to campus, here's what we need to see. Like, this is what it's going to take for you to show up for the next semester. as a student, you have to convince an admissions department somewhere to let you in, and then you have to convince mom and or dad to pay for it and to sign off on it. But the same goes once you get into college. You got to convince the college that you got good enough grades to keep you there, and you got to convince mom and or dad, to continue to pay for it or to sign off on it or whatever. Part of that is to say, if we're going to do this college thing, it's with the understanding that you're going to be going to this, support center every week, and you're going to be doing this stuff that needs to be done there. Now, the problem is you don't really have any great way of verifying whether or not it's happening. But, if you make it clear that, like, look, if your grades are below this, we're not paying for another semester unless you can prove to us that you've been to that counseling center every week or whatever, So it's hard because, as the parent of a college student, you have much less awareness and much less access to the information about what's going on there. So you just try to have those conversations ahead of time and, really kind of emphasize honesty. And that, at the end of the day, if they're not going to the support center, you're going to see it in their grades. It will become obvious. This is far from the perfect crime because it will become known whether they went or not, because you're going to be able to see it in their grades.
Along those same lines of services, we have someone whose child is receives therapy, and they're wondering, how do you transition to not only college but to also a new therapist?
It's hard because there's some college campuses that have great counseling centers, and they make it a priority to have enough therapists that their students can be seen. And then there are other colleges where it's like, you get 5 sessions a year and that's it. And by the way, there's a 4-month waiting list. So that would be something to kind of consider before you even choose a school, perhaps, or to find out, are there other options else, in the local community? Now, if you go to like NYU in the middle of New York City, I mean, you got obviously a million options right there. But if you're going somewhere else, there may not be easy local options. And especially as a freshman, if you don't have a car, you're really limited in terms of who you can get to. So, so that's something that you're going to need to kind of check in on and sort of plan ahead for, maybe.
Do you have any advice for college athletes?
I think in some ways, actually, being an athlete where you have a fairly rigorous schedule can actually be better. Ironically, there are some folks where the less they have to do, the less they actually get done. Having a very structured schedule where you have your classes and you have your workouts and you have your, your running exercises and going to the gym and whatever, can actually really kind of structure their time and make them much, much more effective. Also, depending upon, I had this one college kid who did great at a Division I school when he was on the soccer team, and they had like lockdown study times. And then he transferred schools to another place that had no study times, and he totally struggled because he needed that lockdown study time. And then I've had athletes where this, supposed study time is basically like mandatory social hour because nobody's doing any work, but technically speaking, they're all within this study room from 6 to 8 or something, right? So you need to find out what the real deal is and not just what it's claimed to be. Another potential benefit is an athlete might have, the coach might get some regular reports about which students are eligible or not, and will then put some pressure on. Or, just in general, for the student themselves, knowing that like, oh man, if I get below a B-, then I'm not gonna be able to play this weekend, provides a much more immediate motivation compared to 14 weeks from now, I may get a bad grade. It's too far away. We kind of talked about folks with ADHD not feeling the future as well. It's like by the time they feel it, it's like too long into the semester and too much has been set in stone already. So being an athlete can be a great distraction, but it can also provide some good structure. So I think it's really about the details there of how that's going to work out.
We have a parent who's wondering about, at the beginning of college, should you insist on full transparency from your student in terms of assignments, assignment status, grades, sort of all of those different pieces that go into academics?
So I assume what the question is about, should the parent be able to have full access to all this information, the students' information?
Is it a good idea for their parent to have full access to all of that information?
That's a hard one because on the one hand, I think the way to think about it is if it's more about managing the parent's anxiety, in other words, I need to see it to know that you're doing it, that's probably not a good reason to have that access. On the other hand, if you have a student where you really are concerned, where it's kind of like, you know what, with oversight, I think you could probably be successful in college, but without it, I don't know if you will be. If that's part of the bargain, that's part of the agreement that's made, is okay, we will send you off, but here's the deal. We have to have your logins and stuff to the, grade portals to see how you're doing. Then, maybe that's part of the deal. My advice there is that you sort of fade it out as appropriate, meaning that maybe initially you check more, and then as you see that they're doing fine, then you begin to check less, and you kind of back off and let them manage it on their own. My advice to students when it comes to parents checking their grades or checking their cell phones or whatever, my advice is make it incredibly boring for your parents to check your stuff. And boring means nothing exciting and problematic to be seen here. Move on, please. If mom and dad get bored because they don't see anything interesting, they're going to not check as much. That's just human nature. So to make a point then of, thinking about what is the right amount of checking? Am I doing this so that I can sleep at night, or am I doing this to make sure that my student really is doing what they need to do, and that we're sort of jumping onto things early before it's a problem?
What if your teen wants to go to a large party school rather than a school that, as a parent, has more services and will do a better job with students who have ADHD?
Not an uncommon question. So I think you need to talk to your kid about, what's your motivation for picking this school? Why this school rather than that school? What do you imagine college is going to be like? How do you see yourself handling those temptations of being at a big party school? Let's not be naive about why they want to go there, but to ask them directly, why that school? What are your problems with the other school? Sort of find out where they stand on it to kind of make your case for the smaller school, but to tie then this conversation back to their current and recent behavior. So not like going back to freshman year, but based on how you've been handling that kind of gives me some concerns that in a really entertaining, distracting environment, that you're not going to be able to handle it well. We may need to, and that if it doesn't work out well, that you're going to be back here in like a semester. And that means kind of a waste of money. It means you're going to feel bad about it. It means that you're then going to have to figure out what to do while you're home. Are we really willing to take that chance? And then it becomes on them, again, burden of proof on them to prove to you between now and when a deposit gets sent off to whatever school they're going to go to, like that burden of proof is on them to show you that they're ready to handle it. It may be that, and this is kind of your last option, but, it may be you just got to drop the veto bomb on them and say, like, you know what? I understand why you would want to go to that school. I do not think that would be a good idea. I cannot, sign on to that. It's like if they said, I want to get a tattoo on my face, would you then be like, oh, well, who am I to judge? To just say, like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I cannot in good conscience let you do that. So instead, if you go either to the local school or you go to this other smaller school and you get, whatever GPA, if you can show us you can handle it there, then I will entertain a conversation about you transferring to this other bigger school. But as of right now, I don't feel like I've seen a track record to convince me that this is a good idea.
Last question today. So what if, as a parent, your child has gone to college, community college, 4-year college, comes back, taking off a semester, but your fears or your sense is that they're never going to want to go back to college. How do you help parents through that situation?
And that's a common fear. But, I think that, first of all, a lot of the kids who don't go back to college, or the ones who say, oh, I want to take some time off and then I'm going to go to college, they didn't want to go to college in the first place, but they just didn't feel that they could say, I don't want to go to college. They're just kind of stalling making that ultimate pronouncement. Whereas I think that the kids who, there may also then be a subset of the kids who go off to college, it's a terrible experience because it doesn't work out well. And then because it was so terrible, because they weren't ready for it, then they say, nope, I don't want to go back because they, don't want to deal with it again. But I think that is a preventable kind of a thing where it didn't necessarily need to work out that way. But I think that for the kids who really just don't want to go to college, and that's fine, like not everybody in the world has to go to college. You don't have to go to college, but you have to have some sort of skills that not everybody else has. So if you want to have anything of a lifestyle that will enable you to live independently, there's lots of jobs you can get that are great jobs that pay well, that have a satisfying, life, that don't involve a college degree. And frankly, having a bunch of college debt and then to do one of those other things is really no blessings. So I think to help them figure out like what else, if not college, then what else is it going to be? And that may be a process that takes a little bit of time, but that's okay. Parenting takes a while sometimes. But I think that for the kids who kind of, where they take time off or whatever, either before or during, I'm going to go back to my line from before. There's nothing like a crappy job to convince someone of the value of an education. I've seen a lot of folks where, with a little bit of age and a little bit of wisdom and some experience, they come to a point of realizing like, what? Actually, I am ready for college. I can see now that I wasn't before, but I am ready now. And I can do something good with it. It's going to be a positive experience, not just like academically, but they're going to get a lot more out of it. And, since teenagers with ADHD often mature a little bit more slowly, so they're like a couple years behind in terms of some of these life management skills, it may be that that there's a big, big difference between 18 and 19 or like 19 and 20, in that with a little bit more time, they figure that out, and then they're ready to go and to do well and to make it a good experience.
So thank you so much, Dr. Tuckman.